Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to the Wellbeing Summit. My name is Noel Brown, and I am one of the three leads that are hosting the summit today. So I am a Wellbeing Lead at Talk Wandsworth. My colleague, Christabel Cutting, who you'll hear from shortly, she's the Wellbeing Lead at Sutton. And our other colleague, Andrew Richardson, who isn't available today, but he is the Wellbeing Lead at Merton Uplift. So it's our privilege and pleasure to present you with a series, really, of 10-minute talks from our wellbeing practitioners and the interns that work alongside them. Showcasing the work that we do, some of the content of the workshops and the one-to-one interventions we offer. And it's also an opportunity for you to ask questions, and you can use the chat facility in the on your computer. You'll be able to see the chat facility, a speech box. You can use that as a way of sending through questions and comments. There will be a pause at the end of each presentation where we'll be reading through and discussing some of the things that you're sharing with us. My colleague Melissa, she will be managing all of the chats. I don't know if Melissa, you want to say hi?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Melissa Mehmet. I'm a wellbeing practitioner working at Talk Wandsworth. You'll be hearing my voice throughout this summit. I'll just be introducing the different presenters between the different workshops, and also reading out loud all the questions that you have during the Q&A sections.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks very much, Melissa. So we've called it a Wellbeing Summit, and the imagery is quite a powerful one there, isn't it? Somebody that's reached the pinnacle or the top of a mountain, and I guess to some extent we haven't reached as a mental health service, as a wellbeing teams. We've not reached the summit of our potential, but I think that's partly why we wanted to do this, was to share what we've learned, what we do, how we work with our different boroughs, and invite you to tell us what else, what other needs there are, what other things we could do to improve, so that we can improve and increase and go higher and better in what we do. So the whole theme around summits, I think, is quite appropriate for what we're doing today. Next slide. We want to also just introduce you to some information about the three services as mentioned before, and we will keep flashing this information up for you, so that depending on where you are based, you will be aware that you can access, you have access to a wellbeing service that near you. So just to be aware, all of our services in Talk Wandsworth, in Sutton Uplift and Merton Uplift are available for those that are 18 years and over. They need to be living in the borough in which you're making the inquiry, or you need to have a GP. So either an address or a GP, and then you can access the services in any of these boroughs. And so we've given you the phone numbers, the websites, and some of the Eventbrite links that you can do some further searching and gathering your own information. But we will flag this information up to you as we go along. Next slide. Today we will be showcasing quite a large array of the workshops that are provided by Sutton, Talk Wandsworth and Merton. but not everything is available everywhere. So this slide just gives you an idea of the different workshops that are immediately available. We're actively looking to extend our reach, and where the needs are known to us, we will expand and increase the numbers of workshops. But at the moment, as you can see, the list that Sutton provide, the list that Talk Wandsworth provide, and the list that Merton provide. And again, we'll be able to come back to, you'll be able to see this again if you have any further queries. Next slide. Okay, so this is where we're going to invite you to tell us where are you calling from? What part of the borough, be it anywhere in Merton, anywhere in Sutton, anywhere in Wandsworth, or are you somewhere other than any of those three boroughs? We'd just like to hear from you. So if you would use the chat facility and just write maybe your first initial and say where you are based at the moment. So it could be somebody, you know, my name is Noel, so you might just want to put N, and I'm calling from East Croydon, if that's where you're calling from. So if you can just feed through some information, I'll give you a minute or two just to get that together, and then between myself and Melissa, we'll be able to kind of get a sense of who is out there, and where you are connecting from. So thanks very much. Okay, Melissa, do you have any responses as yet that we can go with?
I'm just going through the chat now. So we have one person saying that they're from Central Wandsworth.
Okay, great.
Another person from Sutton. Actually, a few people from Sutton.
Okay.
Someone working for Age UK in Sutton.
Okay. Seems like Christabel and Lizzie and the team made sure to bring out everybody in Sutton to support today. Well done, guys. Well done, the Sutton teams.
There's someone from Merton.
Okay. So each of the boroughs have representatives at the moment. Just curious to know, is there anybody that's not necessarily in any of the three boroughs? You know, we service and what we're speaking about today is really about the Sutton, Merton and Wandsworth. But if you are from another borough, we'd love to hear from you as well.
Someone just posted that they're from Ryde Green. A few other people from Sutton. Someone on the borders of Sutton and Merton. Okay. Someone from Central Wandsworth.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And you know, keep the chats, keep the messages coming through. We'll come back to them as we're going along. But really, if we can just go to the next slide and get ready to introduce our first speaker. So just to give you a quick idea of the content of the summit, we're going to be having a colleague speak to us on managing well-being during COVID-19, going to get a flavour of coping with stress, managing anxiety and irritability, self-care, self-compassion and relaxation. A practice in mindfulness. We have a mindfulness practitioner who has kindly offered to do a session for us. So you definitely want to be here and to join in that. Reaching your potential, self-confidence and assertiveness, and coping with long-term conditions. So as you see, an array of really interesting topics, and hopefully the sample, because what you're getting is really just a little bite size of the full workshop, and hopefully what you can do as we flash up the contact details towards the end, you'll be able to see how you can register and participate in the full workshop. So it's my pleasure to hand over to first speaker, who's going to be leading on managing well-being during COVID-19, and that's the Wellbeing Lead at Sutton, who is Christabel Cutting.
Hello everyone. Yes, as Noel said, I'm Christabel Cutting, the Wellbeing Lead at Sutton Uplift, and today I will be going through some of the Managing Wellbeing during COVID-19 workshop. Next slide, please. So, stress is a normal part of life, and stress helps us to stay focused. But actually, lots of stress can negatively impact both our psychological and our physical health. Changes in our lives can cause stress and worry, and during this pandemic, we have all experienced huge changes. So here are some examples of some of the changes that we may have experienced. In addition to these examples here, there are also other ones such as being furloughed or being made redundant, homeschooling children, having a lack of space and feeling confined or claustrophobic and cramped. And these are all changes that we've had to adapt to. Next slide, please. A useful way to think about stress is to use the stress bucket analogy. So as we can see in the picture, the bucket represents our capacity to handle stress, and the water represents the stress in our lives. Over time, stress builds up in our bucket and the stress level, or the water level, rises. If this continues and we do not manage our stress level, this bucket will overflow and this will lead to us snapping. However, if we turn on the tap, the water level will reduce and prevent the bucket from overflowing. So to turn on the tap, we need to implement positive coping strategies in our lives. I'm not talking about the quick fixes such as comfort eating or drinking alcohol, because although these may provide fast relief, the stress still remains and the relief is only temporary. And actually, quick fixes can often make us feel worse in the long run. So we're going to look at some positive coping strategies. Next slide, please. It's important to remember that we may not be able to control the situation that is currently happening or the outcome, but we can control how we respond to this. So this principle here underlies the acronym FACE COVID, which we're going to use to give us some positive strategies for managing well-being. So here is FACE COVID. So the F is for focus on what's in your control. You cannot control the government's response to the pandemic, and you can't control the spread of the virus, but you can focus on what is in your control and what you can do in the here and now. The A is for acknowledging your feelings and thoughts. It's a natural response to feel fear, anxiety, worry and low mood and other difficult emotions during a crisis. You should remember to acknowledge and accept your emotions instead of ignoring them and pushing them aside. The more you the more they will actually come back and have a negative effect on you, and your stress level will build. The C stands for come back into your body. So this is about connecting back with your physical body. So notice when you were worrying or ruminating and try and use grounding techniques to connect with your body. Some of you might know of grounding technique, others this may be new to you. So an example of a grounding technique is to pick up and touch objects that are near to you. Feeling them and thinking about if the items are soft or hard, or if they're heavy or light. And what about the temperature? Are they warm or cool? You can also focus on the texture and colour and challenge yourself to think of specific colours such as burgundy or maroon rather than just saying, oh, this is red. These grounding techniques can be really, really useful to just bring bring you back into your body, connect with your body, and prevent you from ruminating and having lots of negative thoughts. So the E stands for engage in what you're doing. So refocus your attention on the activity you are doing. This will also help you to stop ruminating. So really focusing, engaging on the activity you're doing. Then on to the COVID bit. So C stands for committed action. So it would be good if you can carry out a realistic number of activities during the day, and activities can be guided by your core values. For example, you might want to cook a meal for your partner, and this can be guided by your core value of kindness. O stands for opening up. We can't stop difficult feelings from arising, but we can open up and make room for them. You can acknowledge that they are normal feelings. Allow them to be there, and this may be really difficult, but just allow them to be there and be kind to yourselves. It's really important, especially during this time, to practice self-care, and this is something we'll talk about later in our self-care and relaxation workshop. Also, it's important to speak to others about how you are feeling, open up to others and share your feelings. This will help to offload and reduce stress. V stands for values. So think back to committed action, as this should be guided by your core values. Think about what sort of person you want to be as you go through this. How do you want to treat yourself and others? The I stands for identifying resources. So see if you can identify resources you can refer to for support and help and advice. This might be friends, family, health professionals, helplines, going online, neighbours. There are all sorts of resources out there, and there are lots specifically for COVID-19 during this pandemic. The D is for disinfect and distance. So disinfect hands with regular hand washing, practicing social distancing, and recognise that actually these are really caring actions, not just for yourself, but for other people, and therefore these are aligned with your core values. Next slide, please. So to reduce over-worrying and the rise of negative emotions, it is reasonable to moderate the amount of media that you're taking in, watching, viewing. We can ask ourselves, is this level of news exposure helpful to my well-being, or does the constant information about the virus make us feel unsafe and anxious, even when we're in our own homes? So limiting media intake can actually be an effective strategy to help us focus on something other than the pandemic. Next slide, please. Mindfulness is a powerful practice that can help us observe and acknowledge our thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations. As mentioned earlier, it's easy to ruminate about the outcome of the current crisis and the impact it may have. This can make us feel stuck in a negative emotional loop. To break this loop, think back to the A for acknowledge in our FACE COVID acronym. So acknowledge your thoughts and feelings and approach them with curiosity. You can identify and label the emotion you're experiencing, accept your emotions, and acknowledge the impermanence of your emotions. Let go of the need to control your emotions. Additionally, you can ask yourself, how and where in my body do I actually experience these feelings and emotions? Because often they can have a real physical impact. Asking ourselves these questions helps us to become aware of how our body may also be responding to the situation. And recognising this mind and body connection can help us to understand more about our feelings and emotions and how they can have a real physical impact on us. And later on, Melanie will be joining us to explain more about mindfulness, and she will guide us through a practice. Next slide, please. So do we have any questions or thoughts? Melissa, I don't know if any questions have come through on the chat for that. I don't know if we need to give it a few moments.
I'm just literally just reading through the chat now. So it seems that we do have some questions that have come up. So one of these questions is, mindfulness doesn't work for me. What can I do?
Okay, so these techniques we've talked about here are just suggestions, and actually different strategies do work for different people. So mindfulness might not work for everyone, and that's fine. It might be a case of just trying different things and different techniques and finding out what works for you. You can try some of the other techniques we've talked about today, such as the grounding techniques, and I did go through one grounding techniques, but there are so many other different types, and in our workshops, our full workshops, we'd go through some more of these techniques. There are also various other relaxation strategies you can use, and these will be discussed later on in the relaxation and self-care workshop as well.
And we just had another question come through. So someone actually wrote, "This is a great idea. Who can access these workshops and how do they go about joining? What a great idea."
Okay, well, that's good. I'm glad people think it's a great idea. So there's numerous different ways people can book onto these workshops. So as Noel said in the beginning, to access these workshops, people do have to either live in the borough, so Sutton, Wandsworth or Merton, or have a GP in Sutton, Wandsworth or Merton, and they have to be over aged 18. Each borough has an Eventbrite page, and we are going to share the links for that later on. So people can sign up through the Eventbrite page, or also they can email us at the borough or give us a call. So we have lots of different ways. We know that not everyone has access to the internet or a computer, so they can give us a call and book on that way, and we can go through these workshops over the telephone.
Another question just came in. So somebody has asked, what is ruminating?
Okay, so ruminating is when you're really overthinking something, and it's actually it's not a positive it's not a positive thing, it's negative. It's when you're overthinking something and actually it's not helping you in any way. It's fine to think about something if thinking about it is actually helping you move forward with it or maybe put actions into place, but rumination is just when you're really overthinking something, it's not helping you, you're not moving any further forward with it.
I just saw another question come up, so someone also said thank you for answering. So one of the questions that has just come up is, can people who are in the early stages of dementia and are still independent access these services?
So if they are in the very, very early stages, we'd say that they can, but dementia is a really difficult thing. I think if they're still independent and they're in the very early stages, then yes, these are wellbeing workshops. They're aimed at promoting positive wellbeing. So yes, I think so.
And we've just had another question come through. So how do I help someone that is not really open to seek help?
Okay, so that is always going to be really, really difficult. I guess it depends on your relationship with that person. If it's someone you're really close to, you might be able to have more of a positive impact on them. In terms of seeking help, I guess it's quite difficult to answer because we don't know what the specific issues are. If it's things such as this, they're really struggling during this crisis, the COVID-19 crisis, you can actually show them some of the techniques, maybe in this workshop, and see if they find them useful, and maybe you can suggest that they can try and attend one of these workshops. I think it's just about consistency, but obviously if you are really, really concerned about someone, then I would suggest maybe you speak to one of us afterwards or get in contact with us separately to see if we can help.
Okay, thank you so much, Christabel, for answering those questions. I have literally just seen another question come through, so I can't stop washing my hands and it's stressing me out. What can I do?
Okay, so I understand this. We've obviously been told that hand washing is the best way to stop the spread of the virus, so it's understandable that you are constantly washing your hands, and as per government advice, it's sensible to regularly wash hands, especially if you have been out or if you've been coughing or sneezing. However, excessive hand washing, especially if you're in your own home and there's actually no real risk of the coronavirus, it can be more unnecessary. So I would urge you, if you are inside your own home, it is safe. When you want to wash your hands, kind of stop and think about it. Think if it's really necessary. And, you know, if you've only washed your hands 2 minutes ago and you've not done anything in between, maybe try and use some of these techniques we've discussed to try and move your thoughts away from wanting to hand wash.
Okay, thank you so much for answering all the questions, Christabel. So if anyone has any further unanswered questions, please write them below and we will try to get back to you using our overall organisation emails answering your questions. So we're going to be introducing the next workshop. So the next workshop is coping with stress. So unfortunately, the original speaker is having some technical difficulties. So we will be having Ella presenting this workshop.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Ella Derbyshire. I am a Wellbeing Practitioner intern at Talk Wandsworth. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to be talking us through quickly the topic of coping with stress. Next slide, please. So, what is stress? So stress is essentially when our mind recognises danger. So then the brain sends signals to the body via the nerves and the chemicals in our bloodstream. And this preps our body for action. We see this in physical responses in our body. It releases hormones of adrenaline and cortisol. We might breathe a lot faster to get more energy, more oxygen into our bloodstream. Our hearts might beat faster to get blood to our muscles. Essentially, we are prepping our body for action when we see stress. Now, this was incredibly useful thousands of years ago when we were faced with a lot more physical dangers like prey. So this is what we call the fight or flight mechanism. So thousands of years ago, we needed stress because it would actually keep us safe. We'd be able to detect that danger to our lives. However, nowadays in modern Britain, less lions running around, thankfully. So we need to know how to manage our modern day stresses to make sure they don't overwhelm us and become really troublesome for our well-being. Next slide, please. So here we've got a really vivid image of some of the physical indications of the fight or flight response. So we might be trembling. As I've said before, our heartbeat might increase, and that's going to increase our breathing. That will sort of increase the state of stress in our bodies. We might become pale and flushed, and we might have dilated pupils. So this is an image really of ensuring we're all aware that our mind and body are very much connected, and stress on our mind really has an intense reaction on our bodies. Next slide, please. So again, here we can see the fact that stress on our mind has a huge impact on our physical wellness. So it can see things like our heart rate increasing, a dry mouth, I think, is something very common. That's something that I personally feel when I get stressed. Slowed digestion is another really key one, something that people that have irritable bowel syndrome, for example, often note that stress really inflames their digestion. We might have dilated pupils, we might have trouble with our bladder, there might be hearing loss. There's a lot of things, a lot of stress that can go onto our body from mental stress. Next slide, please. So here we have the stress cycle. So this is essentially the idea that stress can come from any aspect of our lives, and we need to build up coping strategies in order to meet them. So stress does lead to discomfort, and you can have a negative coping strategy that then sees that cycle just continue round until we break that cycle with really identifying what positive coping strategies work for us individually, and then that will lead to the relief that we're seeking. So coping strategies can be learned and developed over our lifespan. So we might have learned some in childhood, some in adolescence, and some still in adulthood. It's really finding the positive coping strategy that works for you. So it can take time to find the right one for you. Next slide, please, and we'll be able to go over some of those. So positive coping strategies, we have a huge variety here, and as I've said before, each one will work differently for every person. So are we able to go back to the previous slide? Thank you so much. So positive coping strategies, we have eating well. I think that's a really key one, and one that's really promoted a lot nowadays. If we're nourishing our body and really making sure that we are prioritizing our physical health, that's really going to transpose over into our mental health. Perhaps learning new skills. I think we've probably all seen that battered around a lot during these weeks in isolation. I think it's important to find something that really interests you and to make sure that it's an activity you enjoy and doesn't become a burden. Definitely, obviously, talking about your feelings is so key. Especially in times like this when we do have decreased social face-to-face interaction. We're so fortunate that we have things like Zoom and things like Microsoft Teams and FaceTime. So really make sure that you are committing to times each day, every other day, to check in with people and really talk about how you are feeling. Valuing yourself and others, self-compassion, that's such a huge thing. Making sure that you are treating your friends and yourself the same way. So, you know, if you have a friend that comes to you with maybe they might feel disappointed about a grade they got at school, you know, you would be kind to that friend and say, you know, you did try your best and you put in the work, you'll try again next time. However, when we talk to ourselves about that situation, we're so much more critical and harsh on ourselves. So it's really important to make sure that you do utilise and practice self-compassion. Definitely drinking in moderation, especially during isolation. I think there is a few of us that have found that a struggle. So just make sure that you really are being conscious of how much you are drinking each week. Definitely taking a break. Of course, a lot of us are working from home at the moment. We have less distraction to, make us get up and walk around a bit. So making sure that you are prioritising having some rest for yourself. Caring for others, I think, can be a huge positive coping strategy. You're making sure that you are, overflowing your cup onto others. Keeping physically active, again, obviously is challenging right now, but there's a huge, fantastic variety of exercise videos on YouTube that we can look into. And obviously making sure that you are getting some fresh air every day is really important for our mental health and clarity. Getting involved and making a contribution, I think that's fantastic. Any time you can spare for volunteering, perhaps for your local food banks, I think is something that can kind of give you slightly more purpose, and it really helps with routine as well. Of course, we've spoken before about keeping in touch with friends and loved ones. We're in a different time right now. However, we are still lucky to have those phone calls and Zoom calls. So just making sure that we really prioritising that in our daily routine. Doing something creative, I think that's a fantastic thing to do right now. I know a lot of people that have got back into jigsaw puzzles. Can be great as just a slight distraction technique. When focusing on something that's keeping your brain moving, that can really help to reduce stress. And then, of course, finally asking for help. And that's exactly what our services are here for. So please do reach out. Next slide, please. So thank you so much for listening. Do we have any questions or thoughts on coping with stress?
Thank you so much, Ella, for your presentation. So I'm just having a look at the different questions that have come in. So somebody has just written, I am really struggling with stress at the moment. I am placed on furlough, so my job is safe for the moment, but because I work in the hospitality industry for a long time, I think I am going to lose my job. What do I do?
That's a really great question, and I think something that a lot of people can really relate to right now. I think I'm probably not the only one feeling in these sort of new times. It's quite hard to not kind of try and predict what's going to happen in the next few months, but we really can't, unfortunately. It's obviously easier said than done, but trying to utilise some of those positive coping strategies that we just spoke about. So try and finding kind of a creative activity that can kind of maintain your mind throughout the day might be a great idea, but also talking about it. I think it's a very common fear to have at the moment, and something that might be manifesting in stress. So speaking to your friends and family about it, making sure that they know that you do have that concern on your mind at the moment. They might be able to give you some comfort, but again, I think at the moment it's trying to make sure that we don't guess what's going to happen in the next few months, because you know, we're unfortunately not able to make those predictions right now. So just trying to utilise a positive coping strategy that works for you, being thankful for the fact that your furlough is intact at the moment, and taking it one day at a time. But I appreciate it. It's a difficult time at the moment, and thank you so much for being here and raising that question, because it's something we definitely do need to talk about.
Thank you so much, Ella. We've just had another question come through. So how do I stop stress escalating so quickly?
That's a great question. So I think it depends if you're able to kind of identify the physical manifestations of stress that comes to mind for you. So perhaps you feel that your heart rate increases immediately, and that's kind of a physical sign for you that stress is kind of flooding your body immediately. I think things like meditation, things like breathing exercises would be handy, things that you are able to, kind of tools you have in your tool belt that you are able to utilise immediately. We have a thing called 4 square breathing, which is something that I personally utilise quite a lot on public transport if I become a bit overwhelmed. So 4 square breathing is when we breathe in for 4, we hold for 4, and we exhale for 4, and we repeat that as many times as we need to. As we've said before, these techniques are going to be very different for everyone else. There's also the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique, where we look around the room, we identify 5 things we see, 4 things we smell, etc. So utilising tools that you think work for you, that you can whip out immediately, I think is something that's going to help you to combat stress immediately.
We've just had another question come through. So they have written, I get really stressed by inconsiderate joggers on the pavement or parks, but I need to go out. What can I do?
That's a great question, and something I can definitely relate to. I think at the moment it's really important to know that you're in control of your behaviour, but unfortunately you aren't able to control the behaviour of others. We're all doing our best right now to make sure we're giving each other the space that we need. I'm personally out for walks later in the day, maybe avoiding kind of those peak pre and post work times might be a good idea. So maybe kind of looking at the timings in the day, seeing which places are busier and calmer, and just making sure that your walk is a relaxing time for you and not something that actually produces more stress.
Thank you so much, Ella. So if any of your questions have not been answered, please do send your questions through to our general email. We will be going on to the next topic now, which is managing anger and irritability. This will be presented by Ella again.
Hello again. So yes, I will now be presenting on the topic of anger and irritability. So anger essentially is when we feel threatened with something. So I think it's really important to remember that most people feel angry sometimes. It can be, anger can essentially help us to express negative emotions, or it can motivate us to find solutions. But really the most important thing to remember with anger is that your safety really is paramount at all times. Next slide, please. So here's a variety of reasons why we might feel angry. Of course, these will be different for everyone, but these are just a few examples. So perhaps we might feel threatened with harm ourselves, and we perhaps have an impulse to react angrily as well. Perhaps we have seen an injustice and that makes us feel very irritated. Perhaps an expectation is not met, and that's left us very disappointed, which then manifests itself as anger. I think it would perhaps be naive to ignore the fact that our current COVID situation might be leaving us feeling quite angry, possibly a little bit because of the lack of control and of normalcy that we feel right now. But again, just really emphasising the fact that most people do feel angry sometimes. Next slide, please. So here we have the emotional regulation systems. So as you can see here, all three systems are very much interconnected. We first have the drive system, which motivates us. We then have the soothing system, which manages distress and calms us. And then we finally have the threat system, which spots danger and can see us react with anger. Now, the issue with the emotional regulation system is the fact that it can't actually tell the difference between real and imagined threats. So if we feel we have been threatened, our threat system has been activated in the morning. If we have ruminated, if we have constantly thought about that threat throughout the day, our body will still be feeling the effects of that threat system being activated. It will still be live. So essentially, if we have an example of a colleague who might have disrespected us, we feel they've disrespected us, that's going to have activated that threat system we have here. That will then produce adrenaline. We're then going to see an increased heart rate. We might be shaking or sweating. We may have a flushed face. We may have a dry mouth. There's a huge variety of physical manifestations of that threat system being activated. And as I said previously, if we ruminate on that, that threat system will just continue and continue, and our anger will stay high. However, we do have the power to activate the soothing system to calm us down, or the drive system to motivate us towards our end goal. And the way that we do this is by utilising what we call the stop skills. Next slide, please. So the stop skills essentially are used to reduce an impulsive action and help us to tolerate difficult emotions. So the S stands for stop. In our situation with our colleague, we are encouraged to freeze. We don't react to someone that has been disrespectful to us. We want to think about our actions before we act. Stay in control. So T is for take a step back. So take a deep breath. You have the option to walk away from someone that is making you angry. Take that time to perhaps walk around outside, get some fresh air, really think about how you want to act before doing it impulsively and then regretting it later. O is for observe, which I think can be a really handy tool. So this is essentially observing those around us. You know, are your colleagues having the same reaction? Then you can kind of understand what reaction is appropriate or not. And then P is for proceed mindfully. So now that we've taken the time to stop before acting impulsively and quickly, we can act with awareness and we can use that behaviour to reach our goals, which is then activating that drive system. Next slide, please. Now, do we have any questions or thoughts on anger or irritability?
Thank you so much, Ella, for presenting the Managing Anger and Irritability workshop. So we have had a few questions come in already. So one of the questions is, what if reacting angrily is the only way to get the other person to listen?
That's a great question, and I think it's something that a lot of us have probably experienced in our lives. Someone has reacted, someone has completely ignored us unless we react slightly over the top and angrily. However, I'd like to kind of really clarify the fact that safety is paramount in that point. And perhaps if the only way you think someone is going to listen to you is to react angrily, let's think about, how does it make you feel when you react angrily? Does it make you feel you know, that your heart is pacing and beating really fast and you're out of breath and you're shaking? Those are signs that your body is feeling under threat, and perhaps not going to be a positive emotion for you to have long term. So I think perhaps I would question whether the communication you need to have with that person, is it pivotal? Have we looked at other ways that we can try and get that person to listen to us, other forms of communication? In the end, you need to understand whether your emotions of anger are negatively impacting your life, and that really should be the most pivotal thing.
Thank you, Ella. We've just had another question come through. So, what if I'm not sure why I'm irritable? There were no triggers.
Okay, that's a great question. As we've said a couple of times during the presentation, triggers or lack of, they're going to be different for each person. I think it would be, if you feel like you can't identify a trigger, but you still feel like you are experiencing feelings of anger and irritability, I think first of all it might be a great idea to keep a journal of when you feel that the anger and the irritability is coming up. It might be that you've struggled to identify a trigger previously, but once you have it written in paper and you see a pattern forming, might help you to identify that slightly more. Alternatively, obviously you can come and sign up to one of our workshops on managing anger and irritability, and that will be able to give you a more in-depth understanding of some possible things that might be not necessarily triggering you, but not encouraging your progression from moving on from feelings of irritability.
Thank you, Ella. We've just had another question come through. What can I do when someone shouts at me and I don't feel safe?
Right, okay, that's a hugely important question. Thank you so much. Your safety is paramount. So if you do not feel safe, please do remove yourself from that situation and place yourself in a safe environment, making sure that you let friends, family know where you are, making sure that you do report something if needed, but really your safety is paramount. So if someone is reacting to you in an aggressive manner, please do remove yourself from that situation as quickly as you can.
Thank you, Ella. We've just had another question come through. How to stop feeling anger towards yourself?
That's a great question. I mentioned self-compassion earlier today. So self-compassion is essentially treating yourself how you would treat your friends. And I think it's definitely easier said than done, and it will come with time. But I think as a modern generation, our lifestyles generally are very fast paced. There's a lot of comparison. I think things like social media certainly don't help those sorts of things. So I think really prioritizing, trying to speak to yourself in a calmer, kinder, more endearing manner, I think will help. And that can come in small steps. So it could be perhaps a gratitude journal towards yourself at the end of each day. So maybe writing down and identifying 3 things that you've done that day that you think you've done well and that you are proud of yourself for. I think I personally feel like when I write something down, it becomes so much more mind. So I think that might be a suggestion for not being so harsh on ourselves, is to really prioritize self-compassion.
Thank you, Ella. We've just had another question come through. Is anger a bad emotion?
I would definitely say that anger is not a bad emotion. I think it's a very common emotion, and I think it is an emotion that can motivate us towards a goal. So I think in that sense, it's incredibly useful for helping us promote our goals in life. However, if anger does take us down a road where perhaps things are physical, I think that's definitely a dangerous territory to get into. As we've said many times, our safety is paramount. So if you can use your anger as a motivation tool, then it can be extremely beneficial.
Thank you. Another question is, I feel that I can't control my anger, and I may find it difficult to use the stop skill. How could I work on this?
I think that's a great question. I think stop skills are skills that will definitely be learned over time. So maybe kind of trying to prioritize one of the skills at first might be more realistic. So prioritizing not reacting immediately might be kind of the first tool you can use if you're going to find it challenging to utilize all of those 4 steps all at once. So if you are in a situation where you're starting to feel irritable, maybe those physical symptoms are starting, you might be shaking, or you might have a dry mouth, faster heartbeat, perhaps just prioritize the one skill of try not to react immediately, try to regulate your breathing, try to give yourself that time to think about your goal in that situation and whether reacting angrily or irritably is going to help you to reach that goal. But as we've said, it's definitely easier said than done. But I think with practice, hopefully you'd be at a point where you'd try to utilize those 4 stop skills that we went over earlier.
We just had another question come through. So is anger just immature behavior?
I definitely wouldn't say that anger is immature behavior. I think it's something that can affect anyone at any age. I think it might be something that we learn from in time. So perhaps if we know over the years there might be a trigger for us, and making a note of that trigger so that we know what it is, I think that can certainly help. So I think with age and experience, you might be able to utilize those stop skills, for example, slightly more readily. But I wouldn't necessarily say that anger is only something that's going to affect someone of a younger age. Our triggers will be different for each and every one of us, regardless of our age. But hopefully just with time, we might learn how to utilize skills that will help us reduce our feelings of anger and irritability more.
Thank you so much, Ella, for answering everybody's questions. So it is 2:55 at the moment, so we will have to go on to the next workshop. So if anyone has any questions unanswered, again, please send them through to the general email. So the next workshop is on self-care, self-compassion and relaxation, which will be presented by Becca.
Hi there, thank you for that. So my name is Becca Williams. I am a Wellbeing Navigator and I work at Sutton Uplift. So today I will be going through the self-care, self-compassion and relaxation workshop. Next slide. So here we have the Wellbeing Wheel, or also known as the 5 areas of self-care. So self-care is a really active and powerful choice, and it helps with stress management. So I'm going to go through each of these aspects of the self-care model and see how we can address this. So when we're looking at our physical well-being, or how to address our physical self-care, this may be exercising, eating well, going to our GP to make sure we figure out what our pains and aches are coming from. This all helps to improve our quality of life and improve our sleep pattern, and also helps us prevent developing long-term health conditions as well. So then you also have the social well-being. Social well-being is all about developing relationships, and this is about having good quality relationships over quantity of relationships, and having a good social support network. So this is about meeting up with friends and family, obviously very difficult at the moment, but making sure that you are keeping in touch with people via the internet and via phone calls. You've also got mental well-being, or mental self-care. So this is about keeping your brain stimulated, and this can be through many things. This could be picking up new hobbies or interests, or doing something you enjoy. Might be watching a documentary, anything at all. And this all helps to boost our self-esteem and confidence as well, and also keeping our mental health in check and being intellectually stimulated. It can be great for reducing the chances of developing Alzheimer's and other mental health conditions as well. Then you also have our emotional self-care, and that's about speaking to other people and reducing the feelings associated with stress and reducing that risk of mental health stress. So for example, of that might actually just be coming to wellbeing, might be coming to Sutton, Merton or Wandsworth for some one-to-one wellbeing support, just to talk things through and identify some practical wellbeing goals. And then lastly, you've also got spiritual well-being, and that's not necessarily religious, although it can mean like that for some people, but it's mainly having meaning and purpose in life and being connected to something. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we have how we can break the stress cycle with self-care. As when we're stressed, as we've talked about a little bit earlier in our other workshops, this can induce the fight or flight mechanism, which can release hormones, and an example of a hormone is cortisol, and this can cause many different things, such as vulnerability to illnesses, physical and emotional exhaustion, headaches, high blood pressure, nausea, indigestion, disturbed sleep, weight problems and depression. So this is how we see how our mind really interacts with our body here, and we call it psychosomatic problems. So self-care helps to just break this negative cycle and helps to reduce stress, as we saw with the stress bucket earlier. Next slide, please. So now this relates into our next slide about compassion. So the reason why we look at a little bit about compassion here is if we have a better understanding of compassion, this helps us to better look after ourselves. So compassion literally means to suffer together, and it's a feeling that arises when you're confronted with another's suffering and want to relieve it. And it's known as a natural instinct, although it does compete with other instincts, and it can be trained and developed. So connotations of compassion include kindness, humanity, sensitivity, warmth and understanding, and a lot of us will be very good at showing that to other people. Next slide, please. So this is a chance to think about how we can direct compassion more ourselves. So what I would like you to do is to just, for now, think about a friend, and if a friend is feeling bad, how would you normally treat that friend? And a lot of people would find that you would normally treat them with support, with care. You'd want to talk to them, ask them to open up. And then I want you to think about how you treat yourself when you feel bad. and see if you notice any different here. What we're trying to do here is trying to train ourselves to show ourselves the same compassion that we would show a friend. So it's also helping to reduce that critical voice that we have, or that poisonous parrot, that parrot that sits on our shoulder and whispers harsh critical thoughts in our ear and brings us down, really. Yeah, so basically the idea of this is to try and treat yourself as if you would treat a friend. Next slide, please. So this slide is just trying to look at some of the myths that might surround self-compassion. We've got the first one here saying self-compassion is to be kind to oneself. Self-compassion is not self-pity. So self-compassion is basically just learning to accept yourself and to give yourself a bit of a break when you are having a hard time and thinking about how you can comfort and care for yourself in this moment. The next bit, you've got self-compassion is facing failures, insecurities and mistakes. So try not to see failures as failures, perhaps, and see them more as learning curves. Think about, what did I learn from that experience? And it's not about self-indulgence. Some people worry about showing themselves self-compassion because they think it might verge into them becoming self-indulgent. But self-compassionate people tend to have that balance of being able to show compassion towards themselves and compassion towards others. So it's not becoming self-indulgent. Okay, and then on the last bit, self-compassion is understanding we are deserving of care and not to be constantly judged, because we are human and we all have needs, and those needs need to be met. And if we deny ourselves that, then that can where mental health problems can come in, depression, anxiety. Self-compassion is not self-esteem. Self-esteem is more related to confidence as well, but it can take a confident person to be self-compassionate sometimes and stand back and say, actually right now I need to look after myself and make sure that I'm okay. A good analogy here is perhaps the oxygen mask analogy, where you put your own oxygen mask on before you help others. It's the idea we need to make sure we're okay in order to give a good quality of care to other people. Okay, next slide please. So here we've got some relaxation techniques. Now, relaxation is a great way of showing self-care, and these are techniques that help when you're feeling overwhelmed, very anxious or dissociated from your environment. We're going to go through them in a bit more depth in a minute, but here you can see breathing techniques. This might be deeply inhaling, holding for 3 seconds and then exhaling and repeating this over a period of time. I mean, I actually did this one just before I came onto the summit as I was feeling a bit nervous about having to speak to people, and just getting my breathing in check has just helped me able to calm my nerves. And you've also got grounding techniques, which we'll look at on in a minute, which is helps to focus on the present moment. And then you've also got progressive muscular relaxation, as when we're getting stressed, our muscles tend to tighten up. And just by learning to relax our muscles, this helps our body to learn to dissipate stress, and also reduces chance of developing chronic conditions or chronic pain. And you really need to practice these relaxation techniques before they become effective. Next slide, please. So here we have the breathing techniques that we just briefly went through, and this would be just finding a quiet space to pay full attention to your breathing and just focus purely on breathing and nothing else. There are some good YouTube links as well about breathing techniques if you do feel like you need someone to guide you, and these things that can be done during your lunch breaks or at the end of the work or before work, whenever you feel like it's most good for you. As you can see here on the right, you've got Distress Monday. So perhaps on a Monday, if you feel particularly stressed, that might be a good time to try some breathing techniques. Next slide, please. And here we've got the grounding exercise. This is about bringing us back into the moment and reorientating us to the here and now, also helping with feelings of being overwhelmed or anxious. So you've got describe 5 things that you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and naming 1 good thing about yourself. Next slide, please. Okay, we do have a question and answer section coming up, but firstly, I would like to introduce to you Melanie Simpson. She's a clinical and counselling psychologist that taught Wandsworth and Sutton Uplift, and we're very lucky today she's going to do a mindfulness exercise with us.
Okay, hello everyone. I hope you have enjoyed this Wellbeing Summit so far. I think carrying on to what Becca's explaining about the grounding we will do a very, very short mindfulness technique. You probably have heard about mindfulness. So what is mindfulness? The definition, the very simple definition of mindfulness is present moment awareness. So why do we want to invite mindfulness? Why do we need to be present and to be aware in the present moment? For the very simple reason that our mind has evolved to be in the past and into the future. When we go into the past, not necessarily very long distance past, but maybe it's about something that irritating us just happened this morning or just a few minutes ago, then we tend to ruminate. Yeah, ruminations mean we go over and over and asking questions about why. And normally the answers is creating quite negative emotions in us. And then the brain, the mind is also then goes into the future. At the very moment, we have a lot of worries, which is for obvious reasons why we're worried. Now, mindfulness is a strategy, I would say, just to bring us into the here and now, because the present moment is the only moment that we have. So this is a very simple techniques that I'm going to share with you. This is called the body scan. So if you are sitting, or if it's physically possible for you, I'm inviting all of you to sit, yeah, and really changing the posture. So we normally sit in a quite relaxed way. Say we can really sit up with your back straight, but not stiff. So sitting in the posture which evokes that sense of wakefulness and the sense of being present in the present moment. We're going to quickly scan the body, different parts of the body. Again, because when you're tuning into these various body sensations, you are orienting the mind to the present moment. So becoming aware of the body sitting. Most of the time that we live in our head, which means that the only reality that we have is through our thoughts, images, emotions, and that we know that they are not reliable because it's very much charged with emotions or with the worries about the future or regrets about the past. So let's just come to the body. Gently bringing your awareness to the bottom of the feet. Can you sense that sense of contact and pressure to the floor? At the top of the feet, the whole feet touching the floor. The lower part of the legs, the upper part of the legs, and the whole legs. The pelvic region, the left hip, the right hip, the buttocks, the back, starting from the lower back, moving up, coming to the front, the chest, the stomach, and the whole torso, back and front. The shoulders, left shoulders, right shoulder. The hands, which we are going to do both at the same times. the upper arms, the lower arms, hands, the arms and the hands, the neck, the face, see if you can sense the facial muscles. Are they tensing or bracing? The top of the head. Now the whole body, from the top of the head to the bottom of the feet, the whole body of this being, which is you, sitting right here, right now. The mind wanders, the mind is wander. It doesn't mean that you're not able to do mindfulness meditations. The moment you notice that your mind is somewhere else, just acknowledging it, perhaps labeling it, thinking, worrying, and then bring the focus back, which is at the moment, is the whole body. Perhaps you can sense the breath flowing in and out. Respecting, honoring, and appreciating each breath that comes in. Breath is life. Breath is the flow of life. You notice that when you're consciously aware of the breath, that the breath goes out again, the out breath. We can't hold the breath for too long. If you're closing your eyes or if you don't see, you can now just becoming aware of the space surrounding where you are, the space in front, behind, sides of you, and becoming aware of everybody that is joining this summit. So this very, very simple and mindfulness techniques which you can do anytime at any moment to resource you, to ground you, to the here and now, so you can then respond to situations rather than what we normally do, react, pulled by impulses and worries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melanie and Becca, for carrying out the self-care, self-compassion and relaxation workshop and for the mindfulness practice. If anyone has any questions, please post them in the chat. So just having a quick look through the different questions that have come through already. Someone has actually asked, how can I stop being distracted when I practice?
Okay. Being distracted distracted is a very, very normal situation. That's how our brains have evolved. Yeah? Mindfulness is not about emptying the mind, emptying the thoughts. It's not at all, but becoming mindful when we are distracted. That's what mindfulness is. For instance, that you are intending to focus on the bottom of your feet, and then you suddenly remember, I better switch off that radio or something, and then you acknowledge that thinking, and then bring, with kindness and gentleness, then you bring the focus back, and again and again and again. That's what we do in mindfulness, but it's not just present moment awareness, but a kind awareness to what is happening.
Thank you, Melanie. We have another question that's just come through. What do I do if I never get time to myself to practice these relaxation techniques?
Okay. I think there's a formal practice of mindfulness and there's this informal practice of mindfulness. Yeah, we can always combine this. For example, when we're making a cup of tea, there's so many things that we can be mindful that give us a chance, like just to be in the here and now. Or when we have a shower, very often when we have a shower, we already have so much plans and worries about the day ahead, but can we just stay in the present moment during those few minutes, listening to the kettle boil, feeling the feet, yeah, feeling the body, walking towards the kitchen. There's so many things that we can incorporate this mindfulness practice into our day-to-day living.
Yeah, I've also got a few ideas as well. Sometimes with relaxation strategies, it's good to incorporate a friend, as then that you're kind of mixing your socializing time and your relaxation time. So see if you can get someone on board with that. And also see if there's any time that you don't find very useful that you can replace with these relaxation techniques. So a lot of us will find that we ourselves getting onto social media, and we might just be scrolling through Facebook or Twitter, and perhaps we can replace that time with just some relaxation techniques as well. And it's all about creating small goals. So perhaps just finding 5 minutes in the day to practice some techniques and building up the goals from there. So don't feel like it has to be for hours or anything like that. It's all about goals that are tailored towards you.
Thank you both, Becca and Melanie. We just had another question come through. So how can I train or develop my self-compassion?
Okay, so yeah, self-compassion doesn't come overnight. It does take practice, particularly if you are someone who's very compassionate towards other people. It can sometimes feel a bit nerve-wracking to actually start to direct that towards ourselves. So it gets back to the self-care or the well-being wheel. That helps to address ways of developing self-compassion within our daily lives. So perhaps if we are starting to feel like a bit low or our mental health is deteriorating, it's really good sometimes to look at this wheel and think, oh, is there anything that I'm missing here? Am I not speaking to people enough? Am I not looking after my physical health? Am I not stimulating my brain enough? And those, if you look at those areas, that helps to develop that self-care and self-compassion as well. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And another person has asked, are there any resources I can use to help me practice mindfulness or grounding?
Yes, if you look into, for example, there are quite a few resources in here. There is the various apps. For instance, if you look into the Oxford Mindfulness Center, yeah, they have an app which is a free app. But the one that is quite popular is, I think, Headspace. I think Headspace does the daily practice, which is only about 10 minutes, which is a very, very good start, I would say. 10 minutes a day, as Becca said, really finding the time, because it is important important for us, isn't it, to be able to ground so that you are able to face, so we are all able to face difficult challenges that coming our way. Yeah. The many resources on the YouTube.
Thank you so much for that. And so our next, thank you so much both Becca and Melanie again for carrying through the workshop and for the mindfulness exercise and for answering all the questions. And we will now be moving on to the next workshop, which is Reaching Your Potential, and this will be presented by Ma.
Thank you, Melissa, and a very good afternoon to everyone. So I'm going to be giving you an introductory talk about our Reaching Your Potential workshop. And we will start by, if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we will start first by exploring what potential means to us. And potential, to be honest, it means many things depending on the person. It could be professional development, or it could be personal development or self-growth. But the definition of potential is having or showing the capacity to develop into something in the future. And understanding what potential might mean to you and working towards reaching it involves practicing the following 4 components. Self-awareness, first of all, that's the foundation of reaching your potential, and then self-acceptance, self-compassion, and self-confidence. And we will explore these elements individually. And in our workshops, we would explore this more in depth with a number of group and individual activities. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So first of all, self-awareness. So we would ask participants just to take a moment to think about what really matters to them deep in their hearts, and maybe what personal strengths and qualities you want to develop. In this workshop, what we want to do, we want to rewire our minds. We oftentimes have the tendency to focus more on the negative aspects of our personality or in our lives, and we might focus attention more maybe on our weaknesses. We will talk about the negativity bias later on. So here what we want to do, we want to explore the positive skills and abilities, values and qualities that we have. Maybe some of them are our legacies, something that were passed on to us, maybe people in our lives and in present or in the past. And we want to look at all of that, our activities, the activities that we enjoy, the environment we are living in. And we would have a very deep, in-depth conversation about this. So this would be self-awareness. The next component is, if you could go, yes, self-acceptance. And self-acceptance is a tricky one, right? Because it involves, first of all, sitting with difficult emotions in the moment. And sometimes we don't want to do that. We have sometimes a tendency to push our emotions away, and oftentimes they come back almost like in a boomerang effect, or we might hold on to these emotions a lot and we over-identify with them. So what we want to do here, first of all, turn towards your emotions with acceptance. So we want to become aware of the emotion and what it feels like, just to identify it, even where you can sense it in the body. And it could be something like, gosh, I find it really hard to breathe now. And I feel I feel very tense in my neck and my back. And maybe after that, you want to label that emotion. Just identify how does it feel. And maybe you want to say something like, maybe it could be something like, well, actually, I feel ashamed now, or I feel embarrassed. And I want to then try to make a little bit more room into accepting that emotion. Not denying that emotion or over-identifying with it, just acknowledge and accepting that it is a part of the here and now experience. And acknowledge as well that it's impermanent, that yes, it's how you're feeling now and it might be very difficult, but even though the emotion feels overwhelming, remember that it will pass. And that might be a good opportunity to even practice a little bit of a self-affirmation and maybe say something like, well, just because I feel like this now doesn't mean that I will always feel like this, or this too shall pass. I'm trying to do the best I possibly can with the skills that I have in the here and now. And maybe you want to inquire and investigate a little bit more about that. Oh, I wonder what triggered me. Why am I feeling like this? but always, as Melanie was saying just a moment ago, in a kind, gentle manner, rather than labeling it. And yeah, so with curiosity, not with a sense of judgment. And last but not least, just letting go of the need to control your emotions. Just notice that these emotions and thoughts are there, and they will come and they will pass. They are like the weather. They alter that the weather. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So the next one is self-confidence. And in order to gently develop that, well, my colleague Kirk will talk a little bit more in depth about this. But what we can do is challenging that critical self-talk. And oftentimes we struggle to fulfill our potential because of a lack of belief in ourselves, or because we have little self-confidence. It might be that, you know, the self-critical voice is so common that it's almost in an autopilot mode and we don't even notice it. So this is the opportunity to gently turn, to focus, narrow the focus of attention into the thoughts and feelings that you are experiencing now. And if you notice that there is a voice, an inner voice that has a quite self-critical quality, that might be a good opportunity to gently and with curiosity and kindness challenge it. And how can we do this? A way of doing this could be by, maybe using or thinking about our positive personal attributes. Maybe you want to think of situations in the past challenges or difficult situations that you overcame, and what positive qualities within you helped you to overcome this challenge. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I mentioned briefly before what the negativity bias was, and this is the tendency to register negative stimuli over more readily and to dwell onto this event. And it has its purpose. Our minds evolved to problem solve, as Melanie said before. So we have the tendency to focus on the negative aspects of our lives to keep ourselves safe. So now what we want to do, we want to rewire that mind and to also focus on the things that oftentimes go under the radar. Why we want to focus on the positive aspects of our lives and on our personal qualities. Because when we focus too much on the negative side of things, we might feel less motivated and less inclined to achieve or to reach our potential. So if you could go to the next slide, please. A good way to do that would be by developing a growth mindset to prepare for, so to speak, failure or difficulties in life. So adopting and maintaining a personal growth mindset is what is needed in order for you to reach that potential. And here are some tips. So first of all, viewing that failure in a different light. So seeing this crisis as an opportunity to grow, change, and learn from that experience. And in order to do that, we need to be curious learners. As I said before, it's about noticing what is happening for us with curiosity and in a non-judgmental manner. I wonder what I can learn from this experience. So make those challenges your best friend. Even if I don't achieve this goal, I'm sure that I will learn something from that. And be consistent with that. You might want to gain inspiration from others. We are social animals. We need that support. And take part in activities that you love, work and personal. We oftentimes neglect our self-care. So we need to put that self-care on top of, or on our priority list. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And next is motivation. Motivation is a big one, and we have long discussions about this in the workshops. And motivation is said to have three components. So first of all, the activation, the decision to do something. I want to learn to play the guitar. The intensity, the amount of effort that goes into doing it. I'm going to do it, 3 times per week after work. And the perseverance, how long you can keep up with this effort. So in order to achieve this goal, you need to take into consideration these three components. So oftentimes I ask people, well, what do you think that makes you lose motivation? Maybe you feel demoralized or burned out or stuck. Maybe you lost the spontaneity, or maybe you're neglecting your self-care. You're not in touch with your creative side. So why am I asking these questions? We need to notice What is making us lose motivation? What gets in the way? What are our barriers? It is important to keep in mind those barriers in order to make our goals smart. Could you go to the next slide, please? So here are some tips and some ideas on how to maintain this motivation. So first of all, SMART goals, set achievable goals. If you are not able to achieve that goal, it doesn't mean that you will never achieve it. It just means that you need to break it down to more realistic goals, and then maybe change that interpretation of failure as an opportunity to grow and learn from it. And then you might want to, again, rewire your mind, focus on past achievements, focus on what helped you to achieve those goals in the past. And we need to, set a structure and set deadlines and working blocks. That's also very important. And acknowledge your small achievements. That's another good way of focusing and narrowing the focus of attention into the positive rather than the negatives. And find an accountability partner. It's always better, as Becca was saying, if we find a friend that can support us throughout the challenge. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, that's it. Do you have any thoughts or questions?
Thank you so much for presenting that workshop, Ma. I'm just waiting for some questions to come through. Okay, it seems like one question has come through already. So someone has asked, what if I keep failing despite putting in the effort and staying motivated?
We might need to look back into the idea that I mentioned before about, well, what is getting in the way? What are the barriers? Some people find it even very helpful to write down those barriers and really notice, okay, I notice that even if I am putting a lot of effort into this and I am being very motivated, maybe I am trying to achieve too many goals at the same time. Or maybe I am lacking, or maybe I'm neglecting other parts of my self-care, and I need to focus my attention on that to just like recharge my batteries, to feel to feel ready for that challenge. It's very important to take that break, the time out to to keep on trying when it comes to a difficult goal. So I would say just focusing on the barriers is very important. And if you feel that no matter how much you try, still the goal is very hard, break it down.
Thank you very much, Ma. We just had another question. So someone has said, I recognize my potential, but I have a very hard time following through. I usually get to 80%. The concept and plan is ready. I start working it, and somewhere towards the end, I don't want to finish. Not sure if it's my ADHD or anxiety disorder. I prefer the learning process to the goal, and I can't seem to motivate myself to finish.
Well, whoever asked this question mentioned some extra challenges, that deficit of attention, hyperactivity, anxiety disorder, to really looking into, it all goes back into self-awareness and really noticing, okay, what is getting in the way for me? If it's maybe that I'm lacking attention, maybe how can I refocus the mind? Maybe if no matter how much I'm trying now, my mind is just simply not ready to take on the challenge. So maybe I want to refocus my attention into something else. Or maybe it is just simply, you said feeling really overwhelmed by the goal. So maybe it is about going back and asking ourselves a self-compassion question. What do I need right now? Maybe I need to focus my attention into something else. Or maybe I need to prioritize my self-care because it's been it's been a very hard, it's very hard for me to try to achieve this. So I might want to, really focus attention into other things that matter in my life. And as well to set, as I said before, to really try to break down the goal and to make it achievable. It's also very important.
Thank you, Ma. Someone else has just asked, how can I stop procrastinating?
That's a good question. I bet that was in everyone's mind. And the question here would be maybe, what is procrastination? Because sometimes procrastination is feeling tired. Sometimes procrastination is the fear of failure. And I think my colleague Kirk would talk about self-confidence and in a bit. And maybe it is about developing a kind, gentle, self-compassionate voice and focusing on rebuilding that self-confidence if I feel that that is what is getting in the way. If it's a problem, if the issue is a lack of structure, maybe it's about thinking, okay, what can I do to, again, make my goals smart, achievable? Maybe I want to set a timetable to do this. Maybe I need an accountability partner to really support me on this because it's particularly a difficult challenge. So it's really about going back and asking ourselves, okay, what does procrastination mean to me?
Thank you so much, Mar. And we just had one more person. So they said, I'm finding my motivation only lasts until the afternoon. After that, I have nothing left. And despite achieving things earlier in the day, this is difficult to accept and is frustrating. Any tips from those on the call or speakers?
So this person is saying that the motivation, they are more motivated in the afternoon than in the morning. Is that correct?
Yes, so they said that they are their motivation only lasts until the afternoon.
Okay. So it might be that it's about looking at the timetable and trying to think of maybe smart ways of working around your timetable and thinking, okay, if this is a hard time for me, because at the moment, if I am focusing, as Menali was saying before, the mind wanders. So after being many hours focusing on a task, of course, after 5 hours, you might not be as focused as the first hour. So taking breaks is also very important, and really noticing what is the time of the day when you are more productive. And it all goes back into what I was saying before. Notice and enjoy, practice activities that you enjoy. Don't forget to take part into activities that you love. When we think about a goal, we forget about anything else in our lives. So you might want to break it down a little bit and maybe do, I don't know, if you like maybe doing yoga, maybe a 10-minute stretch, and then you will come back to that task feeling a little bit more motivated and refreshed.
Thank you, Mar, for presenting the workshop and for answering everyone's questions. We will be going on to the next workshop now, which is on self-confidence and assertiveness, and this will be presented by Kirk.
Hello, my name is Kirk. I am a Wellbeing Practitioner at Sutton Uplift, and I'll be presenting to you all today self-confidence and assertiveness, and give you a taste of what we go through in our workshops. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is self-confidence? So self-confidence is the opinion that we have of ourselves. If we have a healthy self-confidence, we feel positive feelings about ourselves and lives in our general. If we have low self-confidence, we may feel negative feelings and may be less able to take the challenges that life has to offer. So what we kind of want to do now is look at maybe some ways that we can look to boost our confidence and build our confidence. So for this, what we will look at is Bandora's theory of self-efficacy. Next slide, please. Okay, so Bandora's theory of self-efficacy, or confidence as it is commonly known, is the optimistic self-belief in our competencies or chances of successfully accomplishing a task and producing a favorable outcome. Beliefs in personal efficacy, or how confident am I, affect life choices, level of motivation, resilience to adversity, and vulnerability to stress. Confidence, Bandura hypothesized, it is based on four main areas or main sources. Now, the first one is mastery of experiences. Now, what does this mean? Mastery of experiences basically means when you become so used to doing a certain action that you become a proficient in it, you become a master of that experience. So if I give you an example, if I ask any of you to go and fry an egg, the likelihood is that you will all be like, yeah, I know how to do that. I've been frying eggs for a very long time. And that's the point. You've found an experience you are very confident in, that you are a master in. And Bandura is saying that with certain experiences in life, what we need to do to increase our confidence is to become a master at it, and that's normally done through practice. So then the next section, role models, and this is what Bandura hypothesized with vicarious learning. So what does this mean? This means that you look at people around you who are similar to you. They can be your brother or sister or a friend, and you think, well, if they can do this task, why can't I do this task? And we think of things like this, like, well, if my brother, who I know can't like do much things, is able to speak publicly, then maybe I can try and do some public speaking. Or it could be doing a new skill or learning a new language. The point is that what we look at around us is we make sure that the people who are around us are similar to us, and then we think, well, if they can do it, so should I, and we gain confidence that way. Okay, and then Bandura hypothesized on how we physically and emotionally feel, which he labeled emotional states. So what does this mean? This means that when we are likely to do a task and we feel happy, elated, joyous, we are more likely to be more confident in that said tasks. But if we feel down, anxious, tired, stressed, then we're more likely to feel less confident in performing a certain task. And for emotional states, it could even be a task that you normally feel very confident in, but just because you woke up and you feel down or you just feel very stressed, it feels like everything which you naturally used to be able to do very confidently, you somehow are not able to. And this is why Bandura says that your emotional states also impact on your confidence. And lastly, influencing and learning from others, which Bandura spoke of as verbal persuasion. So what this is, and I like giving this example, you may have been in school, you may have had a teacher who said to you, you can do this question. I know you can do this question. You've done other questions like this before. You can do it. It could also be a parent that says, well, no, I know you can do this task. I have confidence in you because you've done something similar to this before. So what you're really doing is allowing the other person to persuade you, to say that, oh, okay, well, if they think I can do it, then surely I should be able to do it. And this is how we gain confidence, through being persuaded, and this helps us achieve a certain task, and we have a much more confident feeling through it. So Bandura has hypothesized that our confidence is based on, or is influenced by, these 4 areas. Now, I will say that it is important to remember that for each individual person, it may be that you require, or you are more influenced by one side or more. So for one person, maybe, okay, I feel like mastery of experiences is the main driver of my confidence, or how I think and feel emotionally is the main driver. That is absolutely fine. And what we are saying is that in order to increase your confidence, we can use this theory to see what we can build on. Remember, vicarious learning and verbal persuasion can be both positive and negative, so people can detract from your confidence as well. Next slide, please. Affirmations. So you heard previously of my talking about how our negative and critical self-talk can have an impact on our confidence levels, and that's very true. So one way that we can try and counteract that negative self-belief is by positive affirmations. So stuff that I am brave or I am good enough. And throughout our workshops, we have a list of them. One of them is, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Or others, such as with confidence, you have won before you even started. And confidence is preparation, and everything else is beyond your control. So we have a variety of them that we explore in our workshops, and we also encourage you all to come up with your affirmations, and we ask that you put them in places where you can get a very good reminder of it, so that every time that you have that negative and critical self-talk, you can see it and then allow that to check that type of thinking. Next slide, please. And then we move on. For our work, we focus a bit on confidence and also a bit on assertiveness. So what is assertiveness? Assertiveness is the ability to formulate and communicate one's own thoughts and opinions and wishes in a clear, direct, and non-aggressive way. So it's a balance between your needs and others' needs. If you focus on one or the other too much, then you are either being aggressive or you're being passive. And we'll explore more of this as we continue. Next slide, please. So, communication styles. So, an important part of assertiveness is expressing how we actually feel and being able to correctly articulate our needs. But there are a variety of ways that we can do it. So the passive communication style tends to be very compliant, submissive, talks little, is vague, non-committal communication. So they say stuff like, I don't mind, yeah, that's fine, yes, all right. And it comes from an inner belief that the other person that they're speaking to is okay, but they're not. And then we have the aggressive person who is sarcastic, harsh, always right, superior, a know-it-all, interrupts, is very critical, puts down and is patronizing. And they say stuff like, this is what we're going to do. If you don't like it, tough, or it's my way or the highway. And it comes from an inner belief that I'm okay and I'm going to focus on my own needs, but you're not okay, as in you're less important than me. And then we have the assertive individual. So for this one, the actions and expressions fit with words spoken. It is firm but polite and gives clear messages, and is respectful of self and others. So it says like examples of communication, which such as, that's a good idea. How about if we did this too? I can see that, but I would really like. So it comes from an inner belief where they're saying that I'm okay and you're okay. The assertive person tries to promote communication, and they try to focus on solving problems. They're not passive, that they forget their own needs, and they're not aggressive and being demanding of their needs to be respected above everybody else. They look for a workable compromise. Next slide, please. So we're just going to look at the type of language that an assertive individual would usually say and make. So they tend to focus on I statements, to focus the conversation on us and that we aren't blaming others. So a statement such as, you are wrong, becomes, I don't agree. You don't care, becomes, I feel ignored. You turns into, I feel hurt. And you are so unfair, is changed to, I am treated very unfairly. So what the assertive individual is doing is not blaming others, but is correctly and articulately expressing their own emotions so that their needs are also heard. Next slide. And we've come to the end. As I said, during our workshop, we go into these details further, and we do some practice on this as well. So are there any questions or thoughts that we have from this topic?
Thank you very much, Kirk, for your presentation. We have had some comments actually come through. So someone has written, to all involved, have really enjoyed this Wellbeing Summit. The workshops have really good content and answers to questions posted have been very constructive. Thank you. And someone else has said, I have an affirmation that was given to me by my sister. You are doing better than you think. Works for me. And we have just had another question come through. I have tried many times to be assertive with my partner when we argue, but still he doesn't want to understand my point of view. What should I do?
Okay, so what we try to do in wellbeing workshops is advise what best action you can do. because the point of confidence and assertiveness is articulating your own thoughts and your own needs. Now, in our workshops, we try to express that every individual has rights, and you have the right to ask for something, and so does the other person. And the other person has the right to say that I don't want to deal with it now. So the best solution to this would be to focus on what you can do and not what the other person can do. I know that's a challenging thought, but the good news, well, the positive aspect of this is that confidence and assertiveness is about you presenting yourself. You can't control the actions of others, just like how they shouldn't be able to control your actions. So it's a balance between your needs and their needs. So my only advice would be to keep trying. And in our workshops, we have other tools and techniques, but yes, this is what we can do. You can only focus on what you can do. And that is to correctly articulate your thoughts and opinions in a non-aggressive way.
Thank you very much, Kirk. And we just had another question come through. So I find myself constantly comparing to others' achievements, and it makes me feel that I'm unable to do what they have done. I don't seem to be as successful as others, and this affects my confidence. What can I do?
Okay, so for this, what may be beneficial is that if we look at Bandura's self-efficacy theory, we've seen that a vicarious learning is what you're doing. You're looking at people who are similar to you, and you're saying, well, they've achieved a lot, why haven't I? Instead of thinking, well, they've achieved it, why can't I? So as I said, this theory can be used for both to bring up your confidence levels and to bring it down. So if you've understood, as you are an individual, that looking at others is what's making you feel down, then it may be to stop and try not to do that, and to focus on what you can be, and to also focus on the affirmations, which kind of can help with that negative self-talk, where it talks about confidence is something which everyone has, we just need to discover it. So it's just stuff like that. And so my advice would be to try not to focus on others and try to work on yourself, because we all have a journey and some people may take longer.
Thank you so much, Kirk, for presenting and for answering everybody's questions. We will be going on to the next workshop now, and this is Coping with Long-Term Conditions, which will be presented by Sophia. Hi everybody, we apologise for the technical difficulties. So as a result, we will be having Kirk to present this workshop instead.
Okay. Hello everyone again, and welcome to our Coping with Long-Term Condition Wellbeing workshop. Next slide, please. So when we kind of have a long-term condition that we normally have been diagnosed with, there may be some emotions felt. And for some, initially being diagnosed with a long-term condition can be traumatic time. For others, it can be a relief that your symptoms have finally been diagnosed, or maybe have a mixture of both feelings. So whatever you feel, it's okay. There is no correct way to react to a new diagnosis. So it doesn't matter if you respond angrily, happily, with relief. Every emotion you feel is okay, and it's important that it is expressed. Next slide, please. So what we do try to articulate in our workshops is to start for us to better understand our condition. So better understanding of our condition can help us cope with it better. This can be thought of as one of the first steps in making a positive difference in coping with your condition. So speaking to your consultants, GPs, nurses, or other healthcare professionals can be of a really good benefit. And in fact, we encourage you to do that. And use websites such as NHS Online and other accredited websites for your condition. But do not use websites that aren't accredited. So you may read and hear bad advice, and this may heighten the negative emotions that you feel. So be wary of certain blogs and be wary of certain people on YouTube that think they may understand and have the cure. It's better to focus on approved and recommended and accredited websites. Next slide, please. And then we go on to discuss aspects of accepting the illness. Now, accepting the illness can also be applied to our long-term condition. Accept that the condition is a part of your life now. Accept that adjustments you have made to your life and that others will need adjusting to. Avoid personalizing the illness. Accepting and personalizing are two different things. So what do we mean by this? We mean that, okay, so if I accept that I have diabetes, for example, okay, I have diabetes. Personalizing it would be, I am diabetes, or I'm a diabetic, or I am just a diabetic, or that's all I am. And no, you have it, you aren't it. And that's what we mean by the difference between accepting and personalizing. And instead of making the goal to be cured, make your focus/goal to how can I live with this illness? Because the truth is, with a long-term condition, the probability is that there isn't a cure, but there are ways in order for us to live our lives well still, or as much as possible, live as well as much as possible, yes. Next slide, please. So we then discuss the benefits of having support in your life. So what support does, it improves your ability to cope with stressful situations. It alleviates the effects of emotional stress because you have other people around you that understand you. It promotes lifelong good mental health. It enhances your self-esteem. It lowers cardiovascular risks, such as lower blood pressure. It promotes healthy lifestyle behaviors because you have other people who can support you with making the changes that you need to. And it encourages adherence to a treatment plan. And this is important as well. We discuss in the workshop about, should I gain support, should I not gain support? What we do say is that whatever you decide to do, it's what you have decided to do. However, we do recommend that there are benefits to seeking support, and these are just some of them. Next slide, please. So one way that can help us to cope with a long-term condition, when we feel stressed and when we feel distressed, is imagery technique visualizations. So imagery techniques and visualizations have long been used by most, or perhaps all, cultures of the world, ancient and modern, and by most therapeutic approaches. So visualizations is a means to relax, meditate, bring about future success, gain confidence, improve mood states, gain understanding and insight, and reduce distress associated with traumatic memories. So what we are trying to say is that if we encourage visualization as a part of our day-to-day lives, this can help with us to be able to relax and to gain more confidence about our condition, because it can be a very distressing time. So these are just one of the tools that you could use to help alleviate some concerns you may have and some feelings you may have as well. Next slide, please. And thank you. So our coping with stress workshop, we should reiterate, is a very broad workshop, and we do try to encourage lots of communication because we understand that every person's condition is individual to them, and they may be able to speak and share their own experiences, and every experience is absolutely valid because it is your experience. So we encourage that. So it's a much more communicative and an understanding atmosphere that we try to create in our workshops for this type of work. So are there any thoughts or any questions?
Thank you so much, Kirk, for your presentation. So we did actually get a question come through. So the question was, so hold on a second, I'm just trying to read it. Other people don't understand my condition and this makes me feel worse. What can I do?
So some of the elements which we've touched on in other workshops, we also explore in this workshop, which is self-compassion. And understanding that though others may not understand, professionals tend to, and they tend to be able to offer the support and guidance you may need. Also, though your immediate circle may not understand, I have noticed that there are, if you go online and look at accredited websites, as I said, there is normally a section in some accredited websites to share your experiences, and you can see other people who also go through what you have been through as well. So what we would try to say is try to stick to the accredited websites and the professional people, but there are people out there who do understand. And even though some people may not understand, we would say, okay, they don't understand this, but I realize that I have this. Let me do what I can to help soothe myself. What can I do? And try not to look at other people and try to focus on how I can improve me. Okay.
Thank you so much, Kirk. So we just had another comment. So my mental health has deteriorated since I've been diagnosed of fibromyalgia. I think I will never get better.
Okay, so as we discussed in this workshop, what we want to do and what we would suggest is that a more helpful way of thinking wouldn't be for us to think of us to have a cure, but for us to think of how we may live better with our condition. So I have personally met in our workshops people who had fibromyalgia, and they have expressed their experiences, and some of them do sound very, very disheartening. But the good thing is that they said that they have found other people who also have it, and she articulated that it was nice to be surrounded by people who understand. And if this is having a real impact on your mental health, we would say seek out our services that can be helpful and beneficial for it, so that we can also provide our assistance in order for you to have as much as a positive life as you possibly can.
Thank you so much, Kirk. And we just had one more question. What if I don't have anybody to support me? Where can I find support?
So the good news is that usually you would have doctors and also professional people who are there to support you in the medical realm, but also they may be able to advise you of certain community groups which will be able to offer support as well. So the good thing is with our wellbeing service is that we are in touch with many community groups, and what we would do is look at some groups which would be able to offer that type of support for people with long-term conditions. So though it may be a bit unsettling to know that you don't have any immediate support, there is support out there.
Thank you so much for both presenting and for answering everybody's questions. We will now be passing it over to Noel.
There we go. So apologies, one of the fatal things about using online services, unmute your own microphone or else you end up talking to yourself and looking dumb. So sorry for that. So really just want to thank you all for staying with us up until this point. And I really want to thank every one of the presenters and those that answered the questions for doing so in such a timely manner. The content, there's a lot of content, and I imagine that there are some bits of the content you did pick up on straight away, others you'd like to review. So I think there is agreement that a recording of this broadcast can be sent to you. So please just bear in mind, stay in touch, and we'll let you know about that. I also just want to thank our technicians, the men and women behind the scenes that were keeping things ticking over whilst the presenters are doing the very best that they can and keeping you all informed and introducing the workshop content to you. We have had some people behind the scenes that were keeping things ticking over. Really want to appreciate them. If we can, on your screen, you've got some details of the email addresses for each of our services. So if there are some other questions that you had or some information that you wanted, which we didn't quite cover today, then please do get in touch with us. Really, the aim of the summit is for us to let you know about what each of the services are available, and then for you to get in touch so that you can see what might be most helpful for you. If we can look at the next slide again. That's providing you with the details of each of the services, as we said at the top. If you live in any of these boroughs or have a GP in any of these boroughs, then you can access the wellbeing services. Kirk was just mentioning about those who find that they're coping with a long-term condition and may find it very difficult. This is what the wellbeing services are for. They provide the workshops, they provide the materials, and they provide a means of those who are coping with long-term conditions to be able to be a means of support and help and encouragement to each other as well. So along with your consultants and GPs and other community groups, the wellbeing services in each of the boroughs are also a vital resource for you. And hopefully that message has been conveyed all the way through. So I think we're going to keep this slide on the board for a little while. If you have any comments, if you've got any further questions, just send them through, and we really look forward to either speaking with you on the phone or receiving your emails or processing your requests for workshops. But really want to thank you all for being there and participating with us. And again, a massive round of applause to the presenters, those that answered the questions, and those that behind the scene technicians that were keeping everything ticking over. Really appreciate you all. Thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.
Hi Noel, so someone has just asked, please can a collective meditation be arranged? It was nice to feel like we were all in it together.
I really enjoyed Melanie's mindfulness session, and yep, I wonder that we're looking at how we can take forward this summit in a different way? What is it that we can do maybe in our own individual well-being groups in the different boroughs? But if there's an interest in mindfulness and in mindfulness meditations and so on, then there's no reason why that can't be explored. So send an email. Thank you for the question. Send an email, send us some ideas, send us what you feel would be really useful, and then let's see how